The improvement to ChatGPT is such that it changed, in terms of the paradigm shift, the conversation between machine and human, right? It's a major breakthrough, but it doesn't mean that it's everything about AI. And if you read the latest news, even the last few days, I think there's already a acceptance of the realization that through scaling and etc. may not be sufficient.
Well, welcome everyone to the AI Governance Podcast, where we discuss practical approaches for responsible AI practitioners. My name is Shankar, and today we are excited to have with us Dr. James Ong. James is the founder of the Singapore-based AI International Institute and co-author of AI for Humanity, Building a Sustainable AI for the Future. For over 35 years, James has been a leading advocate for responsible technology with a formidable track record of entrepreneurship and scientific innovation. So welcome, James, and thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Mao. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm so glad that we have a chance to be invited by you to do the podcast. Yeah.
Great. So I would love to start our conversation with where we are in the global conversation around responsible AI. So we had the World Economic Forum's meeting in Davos in January, which I know you attended, and then the Paris AI Action Summit, which was generally considered inconclusive. And there's a sense that the future of meaningful international collaboration on responsible AI is in doubt, with the US, EU, and China and others kind of moving forward with their own approaches. And of course, we have technocratic collaboration on international standards that's moving forward, but it's a slow and methodical process. So I wanted to ask you if you're happy with the state of international collaboration on responsible AI and what you're most hopeful about.
Sure. I think this thing is about good news and so-called not so good news. I think the good news is that I'm actually very proud that they actually held this summit, right? The Paris AI Action. It was AI Safety Summit in England. Then later it was AI Safety Summit in Korea. So at least there's a conversation going. At least you know what are the agreement and the disagreement, what is the red line, right? I think that is a good part of it. Now, if you ask me based on my experience being in AI since 1986 in my career, that's about close to 4 decades ago, I'm not surprised at all, because it's already hard enough to get the technocrats and the venture commercial people to agree. Now you're bringing the regulator and the governance people to govern it. It's actually much harder. So I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. I actually find it still useful to have some visibility. So that's a good part. Now, if you want to be realistic about it, I don't think it's something that can be done in 3 summit over 3 years, right, or 2 years. We have to be realistic that this thing has to be resolved more holistically. This is my point of view. You can't just look at regulation versus innovation, because you have to go down one level lower and say that there is the technology R&D guy, then there is the money guy, the investor want to make money. There's a governance people, also people who worry about risk manager. So they're all different personality, right? They have different priority. So I think if you take a holistic perspective, which I cover in my book with different pillar, which we can talk about later on, you have to understand that this is a balancing act. Balancing act require dialogue and conversations and patience, right? So I think having the right people on the table is going to be important. So I think this is a good start. Of course, they need to make the summit more inclusive, where all the participants from the developed country as well as the developing country can play a role. Yeah. So it's not good or bad, but I think it's better than to have it than not having it.
Yeah, it's a great point. So it's true that these conversations are still happening, which is good, and that it takes time to develop this kind of the types of communities that you need for a responsible approach to a new technology. At the same time, there's a feeling that the pace of change is a little bit different this time around. And one of the provocative statements that we heard in Paris was from Jan LeCun, who's Meta's chief AI scientist, who said that the future of AI will not be generative AI. So we know that LeCun has been a skeptic of the current generative AI wave, has kind of advised graduate students and scientists to proceed with caution, and directed them into AI fields that are not generative AI if they want to advance machine intelligence. And I know that you spoke with him in Davos and have thought deeply about this issue. But at the same time, generative AI has made a big difference and has powered, is starting to power scientific gains, making it faster to conduct novel research, for example. So do you agree with LeCun's statement?
Sure, I was very glad to meet him, actually unplanned. Just in Davos, you can meet people unplanned, and I was very glad to run into him, have a good conversation with him, saying that I've been following his work, and also gave him a copy of my book, right, which is an honor. Now, first of all, I think to clarify what he's saying, I think he meant generative AI is not everything of AI in the future. I believe what he means is that generative is part of where AI is going to be, but it's not going to be the one they're going to achieve. They're going to be everything. Neither is it going to be the one that leads us to the so-called AGI, right? So I think that is what he means. That's my clarification for him. I think, as myself has been through AI many years, I've been thinking about this issue. In fact, in my book, I talk about scaling law with large language model is a major improvement. The improvement to ChatGPT is such that it allow us to have consumer, whether you are age 10 or below or you're elderly, but you can have a conversation with AI. So it changed in terms of the paradigm shift, the conversation between machine and human, right? But it's not. But it doesn't mean that it is a major breakthrough. But it doesn't mean that it's everything about AI. So the hype is such that everything are betting on that based on the scaling law. And if you read the latest news, even the last few days, I think there's already a acceptance of the realization that through scaling and etc. may not be sufficient. And of course, the DeepSeek arrival actually is a shock wave to the thing, and I think it's a good thing, right? And I actually, in general, I agree with what he's saying. I also agree with him saying that there will be many few of AI that needs to be combined into hybrid AI to develop the next generation AI. And I think the model he's looking for, developing the world model based on certain theory he has, is definitely a good area to explore. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So, and I do feel like we've been through a bit of a roller coaster on this subject recently over the past couple of years, because with every new release, if it's either very impressive, in which case people say, okay, the scale, we have a bit of room to run before we can stop relying on the scaling laws. But agree with you that the general, in the past few weeks, there's been a bit more sobriety, both in government and then also in um, within the companies themselves. So you've been, a leading voice for responsible AI efforts in Asia, and we know that Singapore is a leader there. And at Enzai, we have long been members of the AI Verify Foundation. We've incorporated its frameworks into our platform. Um, I think, beyond that, Singapore has been a bridge between the European, American, and Asian kind of responsible AI communities. But I want to stick with Asia itself for a second. We often talk about, we need an Asian contribution to the global conversation around responsible AI. But we have vast populations and different cultures, different income levels, and different political systems in Asia. So given this diversity, uh, do you think it makes sense to talk about an Asian approach to responsible AI?
Yeah. Before I answer your question, thanks for recognizing me as a leader in Asia. I don't think I have reached the level of impact yet, but I certainly try my best to speak out. In a sense, our book kind of represent kind of the East and the West perspective, looking into AI plus our own experience. Now, to answer your question about Asia perspective, I think first of all, I think that having diversity in different perspective on AI is important. Even in the Silicon Valley, right? There are different AI with different philosophy. Open AI is supposed to be open, now it's still closed. Then we have Anthropic, that is constitutional AI. Grok is talking about maximum truth, right? So there are different competing philosophy in developing AI. And I think Europe has its own philosophy with the EU AI Act, and you listen to me talk about it in India as well, right? I think EU Act to me is a contribution to humanity because of all the detailed work, thinking through all the scenario. It's up to the country to adopt which part they want. So I think it's a contribution. Now, back to Asia, right? Asia is a very diversified area as well. It's very different with North Asia, South Asia, India, even Australia and New Zealand, right? So we have different type of economy. We have very developed country like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. Then we have the developing country, and then we have the big country and small country. We have the two largest population in the world with China and India. So it's very complex. Uh, I would say Asia at some point definitely needs to think through what we want AI to be. Because if we don't get involved in terms of contribution, which I like what DeepSeek has done, they want to contribute into technology, right? So we need to get involved. And you with me in India, there are many conversation about India should also contribute to the development of AI. So I think, first of all, whatever Asia do is, first of all, we need to have the mindset of want to contribute. That's the first thing we want to do. While we are maybe developing for some of the country, we need to think about contributing. To contribute, you actually get influence in terms of what we AI want to be. So I think there's one way. Also, as you know, you mentioned about Singapore. Singapore is quite strong in terms of governance by history, and then we are kind of in the crossroad of all the major nation and culture. We have different culture, different religion, right? So Singapore does offer a very different model, and I think it's a good reference model for future development of AI itself, in my opinion, right? And in the sense, Singapore take a very pragmatic approach. In fact, most of the Asian are very pragmatic. They have the balance between development and also innovation. At the same time, we're also concerned about communal safety, right? So we are also a society in Asia based on our philosophy and our wisdom, right? We care about the society while at the same time we want to empower individual to be successful in the career as well as achieve the kind of fortune and prosperity. So I think Asia definitely has to find its own way, but we don't know what it is yet. But I think the decentralized approach may help to emerge that at some point. Yeah.
Great. And I really like that, having a mindset of wanting to make a contribution. And I do feel like we're seeing a lot more contributions from Asia on the global AI conversation. So that's a positive trend. Um, so your organization, the AI International Institute, has been focused on advancing sustainable AI for humanity. And in your book, you say that sustainable AI has three pillars: governance, technology, and commercialization. So for our listeners, I was hoping you could lay out what you mean by each of those and then describe the approach that your organization is taking.
Sure, sure. When I set up the institute as a think tank about 8 years ago, I was thinking that in Asia we need to have our own original thinking. We have to learn from the think tank in the US and Europe, right? Because I think that's what is strong in the US, and I think we need to do that. So that's why I got it set up. It's based on my observation working with different thought leaders and scholars, academias, industry leaders in Asia, in US and Europe, right? In the last 10 years, that's why I arrived at something called Sustainable AI for Humanity. And there are two characteristics which I mentioned earlier. One is being holistic, one is being balanced, right? Which you can see that is a very Asian wisdom kind of perspective. And I observed that to different things because it's not purely innovation versus regulation, right? It's not a zero sum game. It's about how do you make sure you cover the technology innovation, the scientists who wants to be given the room to go and innovate, to experiment. Then you also need to give room to people to want to monetize from it, right? Because you have to pay for it. A part of the money can come from the government, right? So, or philanthropy organization. Then governance, there are many attributes. There could be law, which you have talked, we have spoken about. There's standards, there are guidelines, which you can see they're implemented in different way. And as I mentioned to you before, money is one of the best way to regulate, right? And I think being holistic means that we need to look at the three pillar, and then there are different sub elements we need to consider. At the same time, we look at the context and how do you balance. Balancing is in the context, right? Your context in Singapore will be different from Malaysia, from Japan, from China, from Australia, because we are all in different conditions. We leave the balancing act to each of the different constituents to figure out, but we agree on a certain framework of doing something. But should not you should never limit to just innovation versus a regulation, right? So there are many aspects. So that's why we advocate sustainable AI for humanity as a with the three pillar. And I want to add one more thing to it. The sustainable AI for humanity is about governing AI for humanity. That's one part of it. It's also about the sustainability of AI itself, because AI has gone through two winter and three boom, right? So I have gone through one winter myself, and this is my second boom since the 80s till now. I don't want us to go through another winter again unnecessarily. And there's a lot of price to be paid. So there's a lot of lesson learned from what happened in the 80s and 90s. And the third part of this whole thing is about AI for sustainability, how AI can meet the United Nations the 17th Sustainability Development Goal, right? Basically. So these are things that there's a framework we come together to make sure that we have a different way of looking at it, rather than, again, it's not a binary of innovation versus regulation. So that's why we end up writing the book and try to get the message out and share with everybody and learn from everybody in terms of their feedback as well.
Yeah, and I love that you think so much about incentives, because aligning incentives is such a key part of the puzzle. And I know you spent a lot of time on bringing together, scientific researchers, startups, and then also on thinking through impact investing. So where do you see, when you try to align the incentives of these groups, what are the biggest hurdles, and how can we overcome them? Um, and any, for aspiring founders out there who are, you know, have have made scientific breakthroughs, but are trying to kind of come to terms with commercial realities, what tips would you have for them?
Sure, sure. First of all, my career started as a AI scientist in the 80s, right? I spent 9 years in the research lab. Then I went through a startup, which is a spin-off from Stanford University called Trilogy. Also in Palo Alto, moved to Austin. Then I was into a AI winter. I don't touch AI for a while, for 10 plus years. So I was doing internet and mobile internet. Now the second boom of AI come back, right? So I think then I've been in the venture building, academia, as well as investment, right, across the spectrum. So I see a different perspective. Plus, I also get to see a perspective in terms of the US way of thinking, as well as the Asia, which is a different way of thinking. Of course, some European way of thinking as well, right? So if you ask me how to advise to the startup, I would say number one, I believe in doing good by doing well by doing good. If you will do well if you do good, because if you have the right core values in building responsible AI, you will get a lot of support from people, not necessarily only the profit-minded investor or the people that really care, right? So you get the support of that, and then you get customer who believe in you. That's why I call the term sustainable AI, right? You're doing something that is sustainable, people will support you. So you must believe in that. So you need to find that formula of how to deliver impact as well as the profit in parallel. I do not think the idea that by doing something good, you had to be less profitable. You just need to find the right formula of doing it as well. Now, behind the whole value chain from research with deep tech from university to venture building, startup, and etc., selling to the corporation, right? Um, Behind the scenes are money, right? First of all, you got research. Most of the university are funded by the government. It's public money, right? Then you may actually get funded by VC or the angel investor. Then you get into the corporate. Then you deliver on ROI based on profit and things like that. So money is a very strong part behind it. And typically in the market, there's a gap between uh, R&D from the university, which is funded by the public money, to the commercial startup. So that's where philanthropy comes in, where you want to give enough money for you to build an impact model that's measurable. And that's why in my book, I talk about the 4P model of public money, philanthropy money, private money, including VC, and then public market. You go listing, the money can go back from the public back to the whole circular impact investment cycle. So I think to help the startup founder, we have to build this new model, the 4P model, in order to make it feasible, so that the founder can focus on the science, the impact, at the same time building a successful venture with profit, with the right impact model.
Yes. Okay. So that's a really powerful message. Doing well by doing good. And then on funding models, I think yeah, definitely important for founders to think through the different funding models that exist throughout their company's maturity. But also I think some lessons for policymakers there. Um, so we're almost at time here, and I wanted to ask you one more thing. If you had one piece of advice for an AI governance practitioner in a company today who's trying to wrap their head around this space, what would it be?
Okay. Well, actually, talking to different part of people in the world really helpful. Because the book I wrote is called AI for Humanity, my two co-author. So we have been proposing to the United Nations to adopt the United Nations SDG number 18 to be AI for humanity, right? Then, as my result of my last trip to Davos in January, I have a one takeaway that is actually good for everybody, right? I learned one statement called "Make AI for humanity more profitable than AI." Yeah. So I think the entrepreneur or the decision maker need to find the right way to do good so that you're more profitable. And I do believe that has to be the model moving forward, because AI is going to deliver a lot of abundance, but make sure you do it for humanity so that it's more profitable. So again, make AI for humanity more profitable than AI would be the one statement they can take away and think through it as a new philosophy and wisdom for doing stuff in AI.
Yeah, James, we know how busy you are and what your travel schedule is like. So thanks so much for joining us today and for this wide-ranging conversation. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of the AI Governance Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Val, for the invitation.